in. We're giving it a few minutes. Let others join in. Hey, Big Swole.
Seen a little bit of Freddy's. When they say it's worth the wait, they really mean it. It took like a half an hour for ice cream.
You're kidding.
But it was so worth it.
Pretty much.
Wow.
Pretty much.
I'd wait for some for Weiss, but I don't know about Freddy's.
It's all right. Not graders, but it's good.
So many CGTI friends and Snowball friends. Oh. Series develops out of that. And so tonight's series will feature all women. Natalie will be the moderator, and then we have Allison, Symone, and Amari when she can hop back on. And I'm going to pass it over to Natalie. Thanks for moderating, Natalie, and Allison and Symone and Amari. Thanks for joining on and for having discussions with us.
Right. So thank you all for being here tonight for episode 3. Like Ashley said, I'm Natalie. I'm one of the conference advisors, and I'm a member of the Operation Snowball Board of Directors. I'm really excited to be moderating tonight and just asking some questions and getting to learn with you all from these 3 incredible women. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll make sure to incorporate them along the way. We would love to hear your questions, but we just wanted to start by saying it was really important to us to have a night where we talked specifically about Black women. I think in general, the experience of being a woman is very different from being a man. And when you add things like race and identity and orientation into it, the marginalization becomes twofold and threefold. And it's really important for us to hear from these women and learn from them and be better together. So without further ado, I think we'll just get started with some introductions. So Allison, if you'd like to go first.
Oh, great. Hi, I'm Allison Morris. I come to the CGTI family by way of DeMarco Fomby. And I live in Mississippi. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, and do a bit of everything from marketing and public relations to choreography and cheer and dance, as well as judging in those areas on that spectrum as well. So yeah, just super excited to be here, and yeah, thankful for the opportunity to share my thoughts on this platform.
Thank you. Symone?
Yeah, so I'm Symone Farmer. I have been a part of Homewood Flossmoor's Operation Snowball for like, I don't know, 12 or 13 years, a long time. And then I volunteered at CGTI for 3 years, and hoping to make my way back. But I am from Chicago and I live in Seattle, Washington right now. And yeah, I'm just super excited to be a part of this, and I'm really glad that we're having like a space to have this kind of conversation, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Is Amari back on yet?
I am. Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Amari Brown. A little bit about me. I've been a part of Operation Snowball. This will be my 5th year, I believe. And this also would have been my 2nd year being on staff with CGTI. I'm also on the board of directors for Operation Snowball. I currently live in Evergreen Park. I'm a sophomore in college, and yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys for being here tonight and willing to be open with us and vulnerable and teach us. I think we have a lot to cover tonight. We have a lot of questions, but I think it's important to start from the beginning and what it was like to grow up as a Black girl before you became a Black woman. So can you guys just kind of touch on what kind of representation of Black women and girls you saw around you growing up and to where you are now, and in everything in pop culture and toys at school, and kind of how it affected you? Amari, if you want to start.
Okay. So growing up Black, you know, I live in Evergreen Park, which is a predominantly white neighborhood. Nothing wrong with it, just how it is. It's a beautiful neighborhood. I love my home. There was always like, you know, a comparison, just like inner comparison with myself, like not feeling as pretty as, you know, some like my white classmates and things like that. You know, coming down and having like different hair texture, you know, a different skin tone and things like that. Growing up, there also wasn't a lot of, you know, like Black Barbie dolls to play with or Black baby dolls. And, you know, just like seeing, you know, African American, not only women, but people in general in positions of power, whether it be in the media. I remember, I think I was in like 2nd grade when Barack Obama became president, and that was honestly like one of the most inspiring things ever. I love Michelle Obama. I have posters of her like all around my room. But growing up, there wasn't always, you know, that representation. I think nowadays that it's gotten a lot better. I think that there are a lot of Black and African American advocates and, you know, people for younger people to, you know, kind of relate to and look up to. So I do think that it's gotten better. But for me personally, growing up, there wasn't always, you know, a role model or someone to look to. But yeah.
Symone or Allison, do you have anything to add to that?
I can go next. I grew up in Homewood Flossmoor area, and I feel like growing up our area was like pretty diverse and like lots of different kinds of people. And so that was nice to be able to go to a school where like it was pretty diverse. I think that I feel like a lot of my role models who looked like me, like other Black women, ended up being people like from my family. I feel like from like media growing up, there wasn't, I don't know. I feel like today there's a lot more of like representation, like Amari was saying. And I feel like growing up there just, I don't know, there wasn't a whole lot of that. And I think growing up where I did, a lot of my friends were white growing up. And so I feel like with that, I would get little comments from people about like calling me an Oreo, saying that I was Black on the outside and white on the inside. So I think little comments like that growing up, and I think comments that were meant to be pretty playful, but can have like a deeper impact. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess are you done? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
I'll jump in. So I grew up in small town Mississippi, where there wasn't very many people who looked like me in the area that specifically where I grew up in. And that started to change in my high school years when African American people started to come in, buy houses in the neighborhood where a lot of, wealthy white people lived. And then you started to see a decline in the amount of white people who lived in that neighborhood. That neighborhood became a Black neighborhood, or a Black area. And so in terms of influences growing up, I honestly, in terms of seeing other Black women, all I had was my mom and my older sister, who are both on this call. Hello. So in terms of just influences from Black women, that's where my influence derived from. No one looked like me in terms of classmates and people that I cheered with or danced with or, hung out with on the weekend. No one looked like me. And so my experiences from starting in elementary school through college and even now as an adult have mirrored each other in terms of a lot of times being, if not the only Black woman in a room, one of very few.
Thank you guys for sharing. So I realized that a lot of what you brought up had to do with the media, and not seeing a lot of people around you. How do you think that lack of representation or that change representation compared to what maybe other people had affected or contributed to the stereotypes of Black women that we've often seen and maybe are changing today, and how they've affected you? Symone, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I can do that for sure. I think that as sorry, I'm trying to get my thoughts are jumbled. I think that a lot of the stereotypes that I saw in like movies or TV were like loud Black women, angry Black women, and a lot of those like negative stereotypes I feel like were that was a lot of the representation that like I saw in movies and TV and stuff growing up. And I think now is better, but even now sometimes I feel like that is still the representation that's given through movies and TV. And I think that affected me because I think I don't know, it just made me feel more self-conscious, I guess, of like how I react to things, and like a lot of self-reflection about like how do I want to be perceived. And I think it just made me question myself a lot more because of that.
My experience was a little different. And I guess in retrospect, thinking about it now, I wish it had been different, but my first mind in seeing a lack of representation and not being exposed to, Black women in pop culture and things of that nature, it made me want to blend in. Not wanting to wear your hair curly because the white girls at school or in the media had straight hair. even though like black hair is, curly hair and natural hair is like trendy now. Then it wasn't necessarily. And so it made me want to blend in. And for the majority of, I would say, my childhood and my adolescence, I did. I blended in as much as possible and blended in order to fit in. And so I think that, looking back now, I see that more as almost a coping mechanism, blending in to fit in. So yeah, that would be my experience in terms of Black representation.
Allison and Symone put it very well, but to go off of what Symone said, I think that women in general, when, we're standing up for ourselves or standing up for what we believe in, we're often perceived as angry or, in a negative connotation when simply that's not what it is at all. And for a Black woman, it's even worse. We're perceived as angry for simply voicing our opinions or, standing up for what we believe in. So growing up, definitely I, didn't react to some things because I was afraid of how I'd be perceived. I didn't want to be perceived as the angry Black girl. I didn't want to be perceived as, someone full of anger. But I think that as I've gotten older, I've learned that standing up for what you believe in, that doesn't make you angry. It doesn't mean that, you don't have the right to stand up for what you believe in. But I do think that Black women in general are perceived as, angry, loud for simply being themselves and voicing their opinions. So, yeah.
And I think that what you were saying about how, like, as you've gotten older, it's a little easier to speak up. I definitely relate with that. I think that when I was younger, it was a lot harder because you don't want to be the only one to like say something or, to be seen as that like negative image. And so I think for a while I didn't have my voice and I wasn't able to speak up on a lot of things. And it's definitely gotten a lot easier as I've gotten older.
Okay, so thinking on the flip side of that and kind of what the media has done poorly in movies and pop culture, I think there's a side of pop culture where we take from Black women and we culturally appropriate things. And I think sometimes we don't know that we're doing it. We don't know where it's come from, and there's a lack of research and understanding. But there's also times when we plainly don't give credit where credit is due. I think we see that in things like twerking and in phrases like on fleek, these things that we've taken, especially from Black women and Black trans women and Black drag queens. Can you guys speak to anything about cultural appropriation and how that makes you feel and maybe what people can do to better honor that culture and lift it up without appropriating it?
So I think it's important to, you mentioned earlier, just giving credit where credit is due. I think that there's always a way to do something. Over time, things have been adapted and changed, and people have taken ownership of things, over and over and made it theirs. But, I'm a communications type of person, and it takes me back to common law when all you have to do at times is just almost cite your source. And then also make sure that have conversations, be vulnerable enough to have conversations to make sure that, what I'm doing isn't offensive, or will, if I have a friend who is Native American and, I pull them to the side and say, hey, if I say Indian, does that offend people like you? Or, feeling comfortable enough to, at times, I think when you're comfortable enough to participate in appropriation, you should feel comfortable enough to have the conversation prior to to make sure that it's acceptable, you know.
I think that the way you said it was great. A lot of today's like pop culture and just culture in general come from Black women, Black people as a whole, and I feel like credit, isn't given. We can look at stuff like cornrows being called boxer braids, you know what I mean, and things like that. And just as Allison said, whether you're Black, a person of color, or not, if you see cultural appropriation, calling it out, you know what I mean? And I feel like it's often perceived as being the bad guy or, the bearer of bad news, but it's not. It's, standing up for what's right. And I mean, you don't have to go about it in a hurtful way, but, if you see something that's not really sitting right with you, just saying, hey, that may not be the best option or the best way to go about doing X, Y, and Z. So definitely sticking up and standing for it, whether you're white, it doesn't matter your race.
Anything you want to add, Symone?
I completely agree. I think they hit it right on the money.
Awesome. Do you guys have any suggestions maybe for things like we said, like these terms that I think they're used so much when we hear things like bae and on fleek and fierce and slay, that they're in so much content on social media that I don't think people realize they even need to think about where they originated. So what would you suggest for people when they're using terminology? Do you think they should Google it every time they hear a new term on TikTok or Instagram? What do you think is the best way to really be stand up in that kind of thing? Symone, you can start with that one if you want.
That's a really good question. I think that asking friends, like if it was something about Black women and someone asked me, I think that using me as a friend is a really good resource, but I also think that it can be a little exhausting to be asked like questions all the time. So I think that utilizing other resources like Google and stuff like that, I think is beneficial as well. Yeah.
And by no means do I feel like, someone has to Google something every time they post a hashtag on TikTok. Or I think a lot of times it's all in a way that you do a thing. I can recall in high school, like, being the only Black girl in my friend group, and someone mentioned, oh, we have a dance competition this weekend, and we want to do a braid and a ponytail coming out of the braid. And so everybody looks at me to figure out, I guess assuming that like Allison just knows all about braids, which spoiler alert, like I have no idea how to braid. And so I think when you do things with the, I guess almost preconceived notion that, a Black person can relate to it. I think that's where the issue comes with appropriation and at times misappropriation is assuming that, I'm saying this term or I'm doing this dance, and so a Black person is automatically going to be able to relate to it in that moment. And a lot of times that's, I feel like, where the issue arises.
Anything to add, Amari?
They both put it perfectly. They had it right on the head. Just as Allison said, there's nothing wrong with asking. I can't tell you how many times I've asked either you, Ashley, Riley, whoever, a question. And I know all three of you are always like, it's better to ask than to not know and be in the dark. And the same thing applies here. If you don't ask, and there's nothing wrong with asking. I would rather someone ask than to say something or do something that is, offensive or, but I do think that asking And even using like Google, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think that people should shy away from it. I think that, it's better to ask than to insult. Yeah.
Awesome. So DeMarco has a great question in the chat that I'm just going to insert here really quick and read to you guys. It says, as a community, what can we do to encourage, embrace, and strengthen our younger generations of Black girls to right the wrongs, or just simply learn to grow and help them feel more comfortable in the skin they're in from an early age? So I think this is kind of something you guys touched on in the beginning of how things changed as you've gotten older and how the times have changed around you. But I think especially as a youth organization, we do need to think about how we can be helping our youth and starting them off strong. So Symone, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I really try to do, like when I do Snowball stuff or CGTI stuff or just any kind of situation where I am in a mentor kind of role, I really try to take interest in young Black women and like letting them know that I see them and pointing out their skills and like what's great about them and like really lifting them up and amping them up. That's something that I really try to do. And I think that I try to do that when I'm in those situations, but then also trying to have representation like at work when I'm on committees and stuff like that. Just doing my best to offer my perspective when I can. So yeah, I guess just thinking about representation in like all aspects of my life and how I can like improve on that, like at work, at Snowball and CGTI, in my personal life, like all of that.
I think that just as Symone said, like me personally, growing up, I didn't have role models other than like my mother and like my grandmother. And especially getting into like leadership and just with OS and CGTI, like I would not be in the position that I am without the help of, Riley, Ashley, Natalie. So definitely, being an extra layer of support for the younger youth, especially, little Black girls, little Black boys, because they often, need that extra, like, you can do it. I believe in you. Hey, I see you. I'm with you. You can do this. So just as Symone said, being, that extra layer of support, I think really helps.
Yeah, and I feel like just going off of what the two of them said, mentorship matters. It's so important. A lot of young Black girls need to hear, "Hey, you're beautiful, you're awesome, you matter." And a lot of times we should get that from home, but many times we don't. Not many people, not a lot of people have, or not everyone has, a supportive support system at home to, affirm them. And so I think from that coming from different sources in the community at times is all that a young Black girl has. And so I think just being aware of that and being that source for them rather than assuming that, they get it from other places is super important.
Right. I think we hope that all of us as leaders can offer that through our organization. And I think these sessions are really helping us be better together and be better mentors to everybody, right? Kind of going back to that cultural appropriation we were talking about earlier and how we mentioned Black trans women. And I think that that's been a huge part of the movement we've seen recently. So I was wondering if you guys could touch on the intersectionality and what that means to both the Black Lives Matter movement, but also to feminism and advocacy in general and why it's really important. Allison, if you want to start with that one. I think you're muted, Allison.
Wait. I'm muted. Okay. Can you hear me? Yes. I think that, coming from a standpoint, when you think about being a Black woman, you think about two demographics, I guess, that historically are deemed inferior. So, you talk about a double minority, being Black and being a woman. So just historically, it's inferiority from a double layer, I guess. And so approaching it in terms of not just, hey, Black women or Black Lives Matter, but Black women matter, and not just Black women matter, but it's important to just be inclusive. And I think that the support from the community, and not just our community, but all communities. DeMarco mentioned on a call a couple of weeks ago that, you can't be an ally for something if you're silent and you're not speaking up about it. And so I think just banding together as a community and being vocal is what's one of the most important things as it relates to intersectionality.
I think that the way you said that was beautifully. I'm sorry, I compliment the way you guys speak so much. But she put it perfectly, being that extra layer of support, and saying Black Lives Matter, that means every Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ, it doesn't matter. And statistically, Black trans women, they don't get the same, amount of time in the media, like news coverage. If you all can think of how many times you have heard about the issues going on in the Black trans community displayed on the evening news or, on social media, they don't really get the same level of support as others do. And I think that it's important to not only shed light, I think that if you're going to say that you're going to do something, you need to follow through on it. So just as Allison said, you can't be an ally for one and not the other.
And just to add, I think that like what you were saying about how we're not hearing about that in the media, I think that like we all can recognize that like media can be really biased. And so it's on us to seek out information and to start educating ourselves. And I think that for me, the past few weeks, a like learning opportunity or like a learning point has been learning more about Black trans women and just the struggles that they face. And something that was really shocking to me to learn recently was that the average like lifespan of a Black trans woman is 35 years old, which is crazy. I mean, like, so I think almost everyone on this call, probably like our parents are older than 35, and so I think just taking that first step to seek out information and really playing an active role in being an ally, I think is important.
Awesome. So we have two questions from listeners, and I think they kind of touch on what you guys have been talking about with being better allies, both of them. And the first is, how can we get more Black girls involved in leadership and participation at CGTI and Snowball? What can we do to make them feel more welcome, to be more comfortable, to kind of take that healthy risk and to join? That's a great question. Thank you, Nicolette.
I think that, diversity efforts are awesome and very much needed, but I would urge organizations, not just CGTI, but other organizations as well, to just be intentional, be specific, ask questions like, who are we advocating for? And if the answer is specifically women of color, okay, then great. So how do we specifically take our diversity efforts and reflect the experiences of Black women? Are there Black women in leadership in our organization? Create a visual. Riley and I had a call on Monday, and we both connected with the fact that we're both visual people and we need to see something. see it for what it is before we follow through with a plan. And so I think it's the same as it relates to, getting Black girls involved. A lot of times, you have these motivated young leaders and they know exactly, what they want to do. They want to be on leadership team and they know that they're capable. But what about the girls who don't know that they're capable until they see a Black woman in leadership or a Black female keynote speaker at CGTI or things of that nature? So I think creating the visual will help people and help young girls say, hey, I want to do that. And not only do I want to do that, I can because she did.
That was beautiful. Definitely being, just like I said before, that extra layer of support and an ally is really big. Oftentimes, a lot of young girls in general, not just Black young girls specifically, they don't have someone in their corner telling them, hey, you can do this, you're strong, I see you as a leader. And I think, a lot of times for me personally, if you would have told little 15-year-old Amari that she'd be in all of these leadership positions right now, I would have laughed in your face. I would have been like, no, I can barely get through a presentation in my English class. And so I think that, when these young girls, these young people in general come to leadership programs like Operation Snowball and CGTI, it's important for them to see women in power. You know what I mean? Not just women of color. I've said it again. I've said it before and I'll say it again. My first time at CGTI, seeing, like Ashley out and about in action, that was one of the most inspiring things ever. And so I think it's really important for young girls to see, hey, she can do it. I can too. I think it's a really fulfilling moment, for myself. I try to be that role model, in my community, in my local Snowball chapter, because I think it's important for them to see that if she can do it, I can do it, and then they can better push themselves to get in that position.
All of that was beautiful as well. I don't have a whole lot more to add other than I think also for Operation Snowball specifically, I think taking a look at like who from your school usually comes to your Snowball and thinking about like, is this representative of who is at my school? And if not, trying to change the way that you recruit, at your school about who goes and working with the adult leaders too that help put on your Snowball and, asking them for ideas about how you can reach out to different students at your school and reach different groups. I think it's important.
Awesome. Thank you for that question, Nick. So Liv Lindstrom also had a question. She said, in terms of standing with Black women and demanding more Black female representation in the film industry, on boards, companies, etc., what are some ways we can advocate and support? So kind of going back to opportunity as well, which I think connects with what you guys were saying, but when we're talking about bigger companies and bigger jobs and boards and things, then what can we do for those places as well? Amari, do you want to start?
Okay. Sorry, I'm like trying to gather my thoughts. For me personally, leadership has always been a really big part of my life. I think that as a leader, it's your job to do everything you can to lead, empower, and inspire the next generation, which is something that I try to do constantly. Being a Black woman, I feel like we often get discouraged. We often look at the next person and think, I'm not good enough. I am a firm believer in I call myself my biggest critic. I critique everything about myself. But I think that it's really important to, I think Allison was saying earlier, reach out to those girls of color, those Black girls, like, you know what I mean? Because they often need that extra push of support. Me myself, I probably wouldn't have gone out or put myself, throw my hat in the ring to be on the board of directors for Operation Snowball. Hadn't, Riley and I have had countless conversations, and she's just very, telling me how much she believes in me, and that's meant the world to me. And I try to do that for other girls because, like I said, not everyone has that at home. I mean, my mom will tell you she adores me, but not everyone has that. And so I think that us as leaders, the two programs, they cross over very often. So I think that us as leaders and everyone should, try to extend that, if you see a leadership position opening, send it out to girls of color, send it out to people of color. Because they often wouldn't, I feel like it's so much more like, wow, oh my gosh, coming from someone else rather than, doing it yourself. Like, hey, someone else believes that I am a leader and I can do great things too.
I completely agree with that. I think that for me, it's always been like it's one thing to hear my mom say like, stuff, because it's like, you're my mom, you're supposed to say that. But hearing it from someone else, for me at least, I think it can make it more meaningful, more impactful. And it's just really important.
Yeah, retweet to what they said. I do think that it's important to, again, just have just supporters who, number one, don't look like us, and who, number two, are actively, pushing for women to have, Black women to have those type of roles in the media and bigger corporations. Because people who look like us can scream and shout all day long, but once white women get on board and white men get on board and Black men get on board, and they start screaming and shouting, those voices are a lot louder than ours alone.
There's strength in numbers, for sure.
Right. And that's why we're here, right? So just going off all of that, I think you guys have made some really great points about being mentors and looking out for our youth. But as an organization, or two organizations, is there anything else we could be doing, do you think, logistically or programmatically, that would better us and make us better allies, aside from that, those making those connections? I know that's kind of a hard question.
I think starting with conversations like these, this in itself is huge. Just to be able to, speak transparently. And I think, a lot of times organizations want to, establish themselves as an ally. And so they get in a room and they talk about, how can we pull our resources together, because we have the resources. How can we pull our resources together to advocate for a particular cause? And that's where the conversation starts, and that's where it stops. I think the conversation can continue by, bringing the people who are directly impacted and affected by the issue that you're trying to address into the conversation. Because, when you're having a conversation and creating a plan that you don't really have that great of an idea of how it affects someone and how it impacts someone, it's a bit difficult to actually create change and become an ally. So bringing those people into the conversation, which again, this platform is doing just that, bringing those folks into the conversation to have a direct say and thoughts and feelings, and this is how this affects me, and this is how this makes me feel. is a huge part of the process.
I agree with that times a million. That really reminded me of, there's this really good Gabrielle Union quote where she says, you cannot amplify voices that are not real and valid in your own life. So yeah, exactly what you were saying, like having those people in on the conversation of, you know, whatever that you're trying to amplify is important.
To go off of what both of them said, you know, including people who are impacted the most by, you know, these topics is the biggest key, but primarily youth. I think oftentimes our youth get discouraged because they're youth. I think that it's really easy to get intimidated by adults, but I also think that, you know, as Allison said, this conversation that we're having right here, this is amazing. This is everything. This is all of the things. And I, for one, I'm literally so grateful to be a part of such an inclusive and a diverse community where we can sit and have conversations like this, because I think oftentimes people want to have conversations like this, but don't know how to get started. And so, you know, it takes one of us, a leader like any of us, reaching out and, you know, extending that invitation to chat about it, you know, and giving youth, especially the area, the time, the place to express their emotions, because I think that they have a lot to say about what's going on in our world right now, and having someone like one of us listen to them, even for the shortest amount of time, it really makes a difference.
Right. So we just have a couple more questions as we start winding up. What do you want people to know most about your experience as a Black woman? What do you want white women to know? What do you want all men to know? What do you want people in your own community to know that we can learn from, that we should know, that you think is important to say here today? Allison, if you want to start with that one.
Okay, sorry. So the climate of just our country and society as a whole here lately has made me, like, forced me to have some really uncomfortable conversations, and not just like with my white friends, but with myself, which has made me realize or maybe face some really harsh realities. And I feel like one of the most important of those being the racial injustice, or the discrimination that I face as a Black woman, have been at times, number one, from those closest to me, and number two, in the form of a compliment. And so I think it's so important that we're just intentional in the things that we say and how we say them. You know, I've been told by some of my closest friends at the time, in high school or in college, that I was pretty for a Black girl. And I would, you know, at the time, like, I smiled and said thank you as if they gave me a compliment. And, you know, again, that's one of the hard conversations that I've had to have with myself through this time. I've, you know, been told that, you know, wow, you're super articulate, like, with a almost shocked tone in their voice, and I would smile and say thank you as if they gave me a compliment. And so a lot of times those injustices and that discrimination can come in the form of compliments. And so I think just being intentional in watching the things that we say, even if we mean the absolute best by what we're saying, it's important to just be intentional in what you say and how you say it.
Going off of that, I think thinking about intention versus impact. And so a lot of times, kind of what you were saying, I think that people really do mean well, and sometimes don't mean for things to be offensive and to come across that way. But I think that, if you are called out on something or asked to, rethink something that you said, it's important to think about, even though you didn't intend for something to be hurtful, offensive, whatever, that the actual impact of your words, that matters more. And so recognizing that and being open to that, and just open to like reframing the way you think about things is important.
To go off of what both of you just said, again, just being an ally and a supporter, I feel like we as a people, as a society, you should want to see everyone win, no matter the color of their skin, no matter their race. And I often feel like, when a Black woman gets a promotion, when, she, something good happens in her life, she, it's not the same, celebratory type of situation, or, she doesn't often get the praise or the, I'm sorry, I'm like blanking, the credit or the recognition that she deserves. Me personally, going through high school, I was very, very, very involved in my school's student leadership program. And I can't tell you the amount of times, teachers, administrators would be bragging, we have this awesome student leader. She planned all of this. She did X, Y, and Z. And, when people find out it's me, a Black girl, the shock on some of their faces, as if, Black girls can't, lead and do all of the great things as well. So definitely just being aware of, your reactions, what you say and how you say it. And I think it all ties back into that asking before you insult someone type of thing. But yeah.
Right. So we're getting close to wrapping up now. And if anyone has any last minute questions, please send them to the chat. But just to finish off first, is there anything that you haven't said yet that you want to say or that you think we've missed talking about? And where do we go from here? What are some steps we can all take before next week's call, before virtual TI, or something we could do tonight that you think is a good way to start being an advocate and being a better friend and a better leader? Symone, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it really has to start on the personal level, and like having hard conversations with yourself, and, reflecting on things that you have said in the past that maybe weren't okay, and, trying to think about ways that you can be better and you can show up better for your Black friends, family, the people in your life. I think that it really has to start with self-reflection. And I think also just being really open to feedback. I think that I've been in a lot of situations where I've spoken up and people's automatic instinct is to be defensive. And, when you're on the defense, like nothing is really going to get solved and no one's going to learn anything. And I think just being open to feedback, right? Because it's already, if I feel like I have to speak up and say something, that's already hard enough for me. And so if that person is automatically, on the defense and not being open to what I'm trying to say, that makes it that much harder. So I think just being open to feedback, what if you are asked to rethink something that you said or anything like that.
I would say all of that plus just don't be silent. I've had to learn to listen through silence, especially lately. Listen to silence, because a lot of times it speaks louder than what people say. And so I think it's important, not that you have to, organize a huge event like this weekend, but just, don't be silent. Whether you want to understand more and you're reaching out to someone close to you, or someone who is not close to you and say, listen, I want your take on this, and I want to know how I can be better. I want to understand how I can be better, not just for you, but for other people like you. I think that's super important.
I would say everything that both of them just said because it was amazing. Definitely, I just want to say once again, I'm so thankful and blessed to be a part of not one but two organizations that Operation Snowball and CGTI are two very, very, very diverse communities. And even like I said before, this talk that we're having right now, I think everyone on this call is on the call for a reason, to better themselves, to educate themselves on how to be a better ally, a better friend, a better supporter. And giving the proper space for people to voice their emotions, their opinions, and, to decompress the world that's going on around us, I think is really important. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, all three of you, for being open and speaking with us today. I think that you've given us a lot to think about. And I think that we can do really great things from here, hearing what you have to say and hearing your opinions and your thoughts and ideas about being better mentors and speaking up and really being intentional, not just in our individual actions, but in our recruiting, in our speakers, in our workshops, in our planning. And I think I can speak for a lot of us when this makes me really excited to go on into the future of our organizations and in this community because we have people like you to learn from. So thank you so much for being here. I don't know if you've looked through the chat, but everyone has some really great things to say about you. And I know I can speak for everyone when we say we are so grateful to have you here tonight and in this family. So thank you everyone for being here. Next Wednesday, we're going to talk with DeMarco. So please be here at the same time next week. Ashley, do you have any?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what you said. Allison, Amari, Symone, thank you so much. If you haven't looked at the chat, I strongly encourage you to. Thank you to everyone for your kind words to them. And one thing Natalie mentioned it a little bit, but you guys gave your honesty and your insight and gave exact points on how we can better our programs. And I really appreciate that honesty and vulnerability. That we can do better at the state level. But just so you guys know, there's a lot of local leaders on the call right now who are working in their Snowball chapters. And so I just think that your insight too was heard at the local level on how they can be better allies. And so I just really appreciate the three of you and all that you shared with us tonight. So really check out the chat because they are all complimenting you so much, and I echo everything that they're saying. Symone, if you can't see the chat because you're on your phone, I'll take screenshots for you so you can see them. I started to, but yes, like Natalie said, we will continue. Next week will be our final episode 4. We were doing 4 weeks in a row, and then as the planning with Cedric and Isaiah and Brandon last week, and then these 3 wonderful women, we decided that the conversation needs to continue. And so next week we will welcome DeMarco, Bombi, and then we'll take a week off, and then we have Virtual Teen Institute, and we will continue this once a month because we know that there are so many more conversations to be had. So we will continue this once a month. But I just wanted to be transparent, and that is our plan moving forward. So next Wednesday at 7 o'clock, then we'll take a week off. We welcome you all to the Virtual Teen Institute, and then we will do this monthly. So thank you guys again.
Thank you for having us.
I do want to just say, or give a shout out to my favorite Black woman, the one who raised me, Stephanie Turner, who is here, and I am so excited to see her smile right now. She just blew me a kiss. But yeah, just want to say I love you to my favorite Black woman.
Oh, love that everyone's clapping. Riley, you have anything? I'm putting you on the spot.
Just holding my tears back over here. No, I just think it was incredible to sit here and learn and listen and know that our programs have a lot of strides and a lot of strong, incredible leaders that are supporting us and going to help us continue to improve and be better and do all that we can. And I just want to thank the three of you for speaking, and I'm just so excited that we know you and that we have you part of our programs, and can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Thank you, guys. Thank you again for spending your Wednesday evening with us. We will see you next week for episode 4. Hope you guys have an awesome night, and well, I guess it's only Wednesday. I was going to say a good weekend, but it's only Wednesday. But a good rest of your week. We will see you next week. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.